Hello and welcome back to Seeking with Elizabeth. Thanks for joining me today. If you are unfamiliar with my channel, I discuss mental wellness and autonomous change. If you can, please like, comment, or subscribe. I usually wear glasses, and I would like to be wearing my glasses right now because it is pretty difficult to see, but all you can see is a reflection of the light in them, and it's pretty distracting for me, and I'm sure it would be distracting to people watching. So I'm going to try to continue doing this without them until I figure out a way to fix that. Today's quote is from Ovid, the Roman poet. "Be patient and tough. Someday this pain will be useful to you." Today I'd like to talk about sexual trauma. This is my second recording of this video because I didn't like the first one I recorded, and after I recorded it, I questioned whether or not I wanted to continue making these videos at all because I knew one day I'd have to make this one. But I decided if I want to talk about my mental issues and how I turned around and how it all affects my perspective of life at this point, it was very important to talk about this. So I'd like to get it out of the way now. What sexual trauma is, in a nutshell, is a disturbing experience related to sex. If one has this kind of experience and doesn't try to address it or cope with it in some way, it can affect every area of your life. If left undealt with, it may destroy a person. When I was little, probably about 5, a neighborhood girl made me simulate sex in front of her with another girl from our neighborhood. A couple years later, maybe when I was about 7, I stayed with a friend of my mother's for a few weeks. She had 2 sons, and they would show me their penises all the time. I remember hating it when any adult left the room or when they went to sleep at night because I knew that they were going to show me their penises. Now, these things may seem stupid to you, I realize that, and maybe you're right. I'm not trying to say that these things were so terrible and that I'm still scarred for them to this day, but they did affect me as a child, and they definitely affected how my growing mind viewed sex and romantic relations. Later in life, when I was about 12 or 13, I was already struggling with quite a few issues. I'm sure partly because of those minor incidents when I was younger. I met a young man. He was 18. And he told me he loved me, and I'm sure that is how many stories like this begin. Like I said, I already had many issues developing at this point, but all I'll really say about it is that when he told me that he loved me, I think I would have done anything for him. I destroyed relationships with my friends. I alienated my family, who tried very hard to keep him away from me, or me away from him. I didn't let them, and a few months down the line, he was making me do things he knew I didn't want to do. I'll regret letting that happen for the rest of my life. It wasn't until I saw him physically assault someone that I realized who he was, and that was the end of that. I severed that tie, and thank God have never seen him since. Fast forward, I think a year, maybe 2. I hardly went to school. I was ordered to go to Truancy Camp, which I did not know was a thing. It was honestly a great experience. Everyone was awesome. We took trips. The counselors were kind and supportive and fun. I really loved it. I actually returned to be a counselor for the younger kids' summer camp the year after. One of the trips we took that first summer was to a lake. Camping at a lake, to be specific. So we were there overnight. Me and all the kids were all swimming in the lake, and everyone was dunking each other, having fun. Everything was very normal. This boy, I think about my age, maybe a year or so older, turned his attention to me. He pushed me under, and he didn't let me back up. I quickly began to panic. Fighting against him, thrashing, kicking him, trying to rip him off me. It was honestly all a blur. I can't remember the exact details. I immediately thought he was trying to drown me in front of everyone right there in a public lake on a clear summer day with all the other kids watching, one of them being his own brother. He was holding me under by my hair with one hand, and after a few moments, he forced his other hand down my bathing suit and began to grope me everywhere. Thinking back on it now, it feels both like an instant and an hour that this took place. Years later, when I was 17, I worked for this small sandwich shop in my town. The boss would occasionally make everyone leave the room, come up next to me, whisper in my ear, "Do you like your job? Do you want to keep working here?" And he would stick his hand down the back of my pants. I let this go on for too long. Why? I don't know. But eventually I gathered the courage to quit, and this guy's such a piece of work. When I put in my 2 weeks notice, he said, "No, your last day is today." But I accepted it. I was grateful to be rid of him more quickly. Later, I asked the other girls I knew that worked there if they'd had the same experience, and of course their answer was yes. Why we allow these things to happen to us and don't bring the fires of hell to these people is beyond me. I have literally spent years wondering. I do know that when it comes to that last instance, I didn't want him to lose his business because of me, and at the time I wasn't sure that it was happening to anyone else either. As for the other girls, though, I can't say. As for when I was young, well, I could probably explore why I did what I did and didn't do what I didn't do for days. I think most of me just wanted to forget any of it happened in the first place. And I think a little part of me felt like I deserved it too. Because if I wasn't, then why did it keep happening? Why did I let it keep happening? It's funny in a terrible sort of way that that's how it goes. If a woman, or any person for that matter, has a story, they probably have a few. I think after a first incident, you're sort of marked in a way. There's something innate in predatorial people that can sense this in others, I think. Almost smell their weakness, their vulnerability. How? I don't have the slightest clue, of course. I mean, who am I? But to this day, sometimes, after how much I've changed and all the work that I've done, and no matter how different everything in my life is, when I'm in a crowded room, I still feel like the people there can see all my worst parts. Like all my flaws and all the terrible things in my past are scribbled across my face forever. And maybe that's it. Maybe it's a vulnerable person's expressions or the way that they speak or carry themselves. Maybe it's the way that they react when you poke and prod them to test their boundaries. All I know is that it is something, some kind of pheromone that brings them in for the kill. Predators, both in the wild and polite society, will always seek vulnerable prey. There are some people I know with similar stories that have decided the entire male existence is the problem. I do not blame men. I have had my issue with men for these things. I've always loved men. I don't blame them as a whole for what happened. And why would I? But there was a part of me for a few years at least, right under the surface, that felt like any man could do these things. That all men wanted to do these things, and it was only themselves holding them back. I feared men, even the ones I loved and trusted. I no longer feel this way. This should go without saying, but these days, I'm sorry to say, some people need to be reminded that generalizing an entire people and laying crimes at their feet they did not commit is an awful, disgusting, inhumane sin. And it says far more about you than it does about any of those people you blame. I don't even really hold anger towards those people. Not anymore, at least. For all I know, they feel terrible about what happened and have since changed greatly. I hope that's the case, at least. Because sometimes it still feels difficult to accept the fact that someone else may have been hurt because it was too difficult for me to face what happened. That is something I will have to live with. and it hurts far worse than anything any of them could ever do to me. These things that happened and how they affected me led to years of self-inflicted damage. Mental instability, trouble with relationships, both platonic and romantic, trouble with my relationship with myself, trouble connecting to the people around me at all, problems with intimacy, anger, substance abuse, promiscuity. It was a very difficult road for me for a long time. I'm going to tell you what really helped me put this all behind me and move on with my life. It may piss some people off, it may seem counterproductive even, but I'm not a professional, keep that in mind. I am just a person trying to tell you the ways that help me enjoy living and life again. This is how I coped. I accepted what happened, and I blamed myself for it. I decided not to be a victim of these people or these events anymore. Becoming my own perpetrator was my way of taking control of it. Telling myself that these things would not have happened if I hadn't let them happen put the power back in my hands. It gave me the ability to tell myself it would never happen again. And just as quickly as I decided that that was how I was going to feel about it from now on, I stopped feeling like I was being held under the water. I was free. Now, I don't suggest this coping method for everybody. Obviously, we each must find our own answers. And I'm going to share with you a few other coping methods I found through therapy, the internet, or developed on my own. 5 senses. This is a good one. It's for grounding you in the moment when you start to float away. When you feel yourself losing it a bit, whether in a panic or anger or sadness, count 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. Writing. Obviously, I am a big fan of writing, but you don't need any real interest in it or talent for it to do this. Just begin scribbling anything and everything running through your head at any given moment. Write to the people who are making you feel this way. It'll help you understand more deeply why you feel the way you do, and next time you speak with them, there will be less anger, less tension, more clarity in the way that you speak and how you address the topic. Fantasize. I have created fantasy people and places for as long as I can remember. It was definitely my way of finding something enjoyable in my least enjoyable moments. Sometimes it really helps me to get away, like a mental vacation from everything raging in my mind. Another darker way of fantasizing to cope is fantasizing of breaking things or screaming at the top of your lungs. Obviously, we cannot just start breaking things and screaming at the top of our lungs wherever we are at any given moment. But sometimes when I imagine doing these things, it has the effect of actually doing it and relieves a lot of pressure. Another kind of mental vacation I use, this one much more frequently, since I use it for things like changing the cat box and whatnot, is a happy place. Mine is a tiny little woodland landscape with a waterfall. No one exists but me. I swim in a small crystal clear lake without any fish. I'm scared of fish. Nothing is starving or in pain. We all just exist, together, happily, like otherworldly beings. It sounds strange, I know, but it really helps me. Get a hobby. This one is probably the most important one I could suggest. Become a master at something, or at least shoot to be the master of something. Find something you're passionate about, that you can't help but think about when you're at work or in stressful situations. Something to look forward to. It helps you form a discipline in yourself as well. And it will give you a confidence no other person's validation of you could ever give you. Help someone. Anyone, if you can. Go to bed knowing you sacrificed a little bit that day to give someone else a little bit more than what they had. The last one I will give you is a big one for me. Picture the child version of yourself as a person outside of yourself. When I began doing this a few years ago, it really hurt me. It hurt me to try to imagine looking at her little face, not knowing how to prepare her for the awful things she was going to feel one day for a long time. The helplessness, the hopelessness, the wrath, it broke my heart for her. Because like everyone else in the world, I want every child to be happy, to have a good life. I imagined my very worst moments, and instead of me, it was that little girl version of me suffering in my place. I decided to do anything that was in my power to help her. And now, when I envision that little girl, it makes me smile, knowing how happy she's going to be one day. I realize this is a tough subject, but I do think it's worth saying that I wouldn't be who I am if these things hadn't happened to me. I know it's almost a cliche to say something like that, and everyone says it, but it's true. I truly don't know if I would have this kind of perspective or state of mind if these things had not happened, if I hadn't spent years thinking about them. And I'd like to share with you my favorite quote from the author Francesca Lia Block from her book Wasteland, which I read while I was in high school. Pain can give you sight or make you blind. I'll keep it simple this week for advice. Make eye contact. Force it if you must. This was difficult for me for a long time, but it is vital. Like I said, I had intimacy issues, and you wouldn't think of it that way, but it really is intimate looking into someone's eyes as they're speaking to you. It forms a trust. People don't trust you if they can't get you to look them in the eye when you speak to them. If it's a lot of trouble, you could start with the nose or the forehead like I did and kind of just inch your way to the eye. Eventually, it gets easier and easier. And now it's not a problem at all. It definitely builds confidence and discipline. I know I keep bringing that up, but it is imperative to build the discipline in yourself if you want to get better from anything. It also really helped me to connect. But one of the most important things about making eye contact is that it gives others respect and demands their respect in return. Thanks for hanging in there with me today. I'm very grateful. And that's all I've got. Godspeed, guys.